Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Today's video is called Released in 1992 and available on vinyl. So you might remember my last video was called Not Released on Vinyl, or Is It? And I highlighted some of the albums from around 1991, 1992 that were from the hard rock, metal, hair metal genre that were not released on vinyl, or were very, very difficult to find on vinyl. And I talked about some of the alternatives, ways that you can maybe get some of those tracks on vinyls, or check out those artists in other ways on albums where they have been released on vinyl. So today's video is going to be called Released in 1992 and on vinyl. So from my collection I have a few albums that were released in 1992 and did get a vinyl release, and I've been able to get those. Now, a lot of the albums that, especially from the hard rock and metal genre, that were released in 1992 weren't particularly easy to get. As I mentioned in my last video, from 1991, 1992, vinyl was starting to be phased out, and you possibly could only get the album in some countries. So it might be released only on CD in some areas, and other areas would get a vinyl release as well. So starting off with, actually before I get started, one thing I did want to mention is that when I'm saying 1992, I'm talking about an album that has 1992 written on the back cover. Now, sometimes what happens, an album might be released in one area of the world in 1991, and then gets released, that same album then gets released later on in, say, for example, 1992. So it might be initially released in 1991, say in Europe, and then gets an American release in 1992. So what I'm going for is 1992 as the release year that it says on the back cover of the album. Alright, so and a good example of that is my first album I'm going to show. This is Stage Dolls and Stripped. Now, if you look on Discogs, I think it actually says it's a 1991 release officially, and it may have been released in Europe perhaps initially in 1991, but it does say on the back cover of my copy 1992. This album was actually recorded in 1990, so there was a bit of a delay, I guess, with this coming out, and I was a bit late to even know. I didn't know at the time that this had even been released in 1992. I was a big fan of their previous album, but yeah, I tracked this one down later, and it was a little bit disappointing. Not as good as their previous album, but still a couple of reasonable tracks on here, and it's good to keep for my collection. So that's Stage Dolls 1992 release, and it's not that difficult to get on vinyl. Now, some of these albums I'm going to be showing today are very difficult to get, or you can get them, but you're going to pay top dollar. Now, just before I move on to my next album release, I did want to show something from a band that I actually don't have, that I would potentially quite like to have. They released an album in 1992. It is available on vinyl, and maybe this could have been mentioned on my last video, although again it is available on vinyl, but very difficult to get on vinyl and very expensive to get on vinyl. And that's the debut by Unruly Child. Now, I don't have that album on vinyl, but I do have the 4-track promo that came out, and this is pretty easy to get. This is not expensive. Again, like I said in my last video, if if you're finding the album is not possible to get or very expensive to get, have a look and see if there's some promo tracks that have been released on vinyl, and you might be able to pick it at least get some of the songs from the album on vinyl that way. This has got 4 of the songs from the album: Take Me Down Nasty, Wind Me Up, On the Rise, and When Love Is Gone, which actually kind of happened to be some of my favourite tracks from the album. There's a couple on the album that I like as well that aren't on this, and so for that reason I wouldn't mind having the album on vinyl. I don't actually even have the album on CD, otherwise I probably would have showed it last week on my last video. But still good to have the 4-track promo, and maybe at some point I'll track down the album. Of course, the longer you leave it these days, it seems the more expensive it gets to get an album. I definitely thought about it. I've seen it from time to time and thought about buying it, but it was expensive then. This is a few years ago, and it's even got more expensive since then, and may not even be available at the moment. I'm not sure, but quality album. They're still releasing albums from time to time. They're putting out new stuff. Unruly Child with different vocalists, but happy to have the promo tracks anyway. Alright, so released in 1992. Now we're going to move on to 4 albums that were released, another 4 albums that were released in 1992 that I do happen to have on vinyl. And like I said, some of these albums are very hard to find now, or you can find them and they're not cheap to buy. I was lucky that a lot of these albums I purchased maybe 10 years ago when I just started getting back into collecting records again, and so I didn't actually pay anywhere near the amount of money that these albums go for, so I kind of got a bit lucky in that way. And often too, a lot of these albums that came out in 1992 were ones I really liked and I really wanted to grab on vinyl, maybe too because I didn't perhaps have them on vinyl back in the day. So the first one is Wildside, Under the Influence. Okay, this is their debut album, released in 1992. Like I said again in my last video, hair metal's being phased out, so is vinyl. So 1992, when this got released, it is a great album, and a lot of people have discovered it since 1992 and realised what a fantastic album it is. But just in 1992, it was just perhaps just a little bit late, and the band did release a follow-up album, but it certainly wasn't as good as this one, and most people would agree, I think, with that. And it had a more of a grunge element to it, I think you might say. Not a big fan of that album, but love this. This is more the hair metal kind of style. Great songs on here: Hang On Lucy, Clock Strikes, How Many Lies, So Far Away, Just Another Night. Yeah, good album. I guess if it had been released in 89, 88, they could have been, like Skid Row, something like that, but it wasn't to be. The guitar player from this band, though, is still going on to do quite well for himself, Brent Woods, and has been the guitar player for Vince Neil's solo band. So he's still doing his thing. The vocalist, Drew Hanna, ended up going on to direct porn movies, is what I heard. He's probably done a few other things as well, but that was quite an interesting career move. Alright, so next one is quite a well-known band, and when this came out in 1992, they probably were expecting to just carry on and have another successful album. It may have gone gold, but I think it probably did. but their previous one, of course, platinum. And I'm talking about Slaughter, the Wildlife. This one, yeah, not so popular. And for a while there, it wasn't that difficult to get. It was released on vinyl in a lot of places. Got a few copies of it around, but it's getting very tricky to get now. Very similar to their previous album, and yeah, it's a great album, well produced by Dana Strum and Mark Slaughter, and I like the album. Yeah, it probably didn't perform to what they were hoping sales wise that it was going to. They have released albums after this, but yeah, the mid '90s for bands like Slaughter were a bit tough, and they pretty much these days are just a touring band. They haven't released anything for quite some time. Of course, the guitarist Tim Kelly died some time ago, and Mark Slaughter's been putting out solo albums also. And of course, Dana Strum has been part of the hard rock and metal scene for quite some time. All right, so again, like I said, for a while there, it wasn't that difficult to find, but now it's getting more and more tricky to grab that one. Another one that's also not easy to find is Lillian Axe and Poetic Justice, released in 1992, follow-up to Love and War, which is a fantastic album, one of my favourite albums from the, I think it was in the 80s, late 80s. Yeah, and I don't like this one as much, but it has some great tracks. True Believer being one of my favourites from this one. Released on Music for Nations, which is interesting. Music for Nations were still putting out some vinyl in 1992. And in fact, even their next album as well, released in 1993, is also available on vinyl, which was a bit of a surprise. I don't have that one. Not that big a fan of that album. I thought they've sort of deteriorated a little. Deteriorated might be a bit harsh, but I feel like the quality, at least what I like in Lillian Axe, has not been as great as I think they were at their peak with Love and War. And of course, they don't have Ron Taylor in the band these days. But yeah, this is still a solid album, so happy to have this one on vinyl. And yeah, very difficult to find. And I think their 1993 one even harder or more expensive to get as well, which I guess would make sense. A 1993 release on vinyl, probably only a few copies of those pressed. Right, final one for this video, and I will be doing, this is part one, so we'll be doing some more videos on this. Actually, when I was going through my collection, looking for 1992 releases, I actually managed to find more than I thought, but it was interesting comparing as I was going through the number of 1991 releases in my collection to the number of 1992 releases in my collection. A lot of albums on vinyl from 1991. Even then, when vinyl was starting to die out a little bit, I still have a lot of records in my collection from 1991. But of course, as I said in my previous video, a lot of the bands I liked, a lot of the hair metal bands, were also starting to fade out, certainly in 1992. Nirvana was at full force, and now a lot of those bands weren't staying together or weren't getting released. So it was interesting just seeing how many I've got from 1991 compared to 1992. And I went through on my last video that there were albums released by hair metal bands or hard rock bands in 1992, but and some of them didn't get a vinyl release at all. All right. So still got quite a few to show. This is the last one for today. This is Love Hate and Wasted in America. So one of my favourite bands. What I like about Love Hate is their consistency. Granted, their first two are definitely the two best. In fact, just outstanding albums. So their first two are just classic albums. But there are some of their other albums that they released in the 90s. Still worth checking out. Some great songs. Was Jizzy Pearl, fantastic vocalist. Yeah, just great lyrics. Yeah, just musicianship is fantastic. Original, but yeah, they did get lumped into the hair metal category. I guess there's a little bit of a Guns N' Roses kind of vibe with them, but just great hard rock, and yeah, awesome songs. This might even be better than their debut album. It's just consistently good from start to finish. Probably not. It's not like there's one or two standout tracks. They're all just really good side tracks from start to finish. So yeah, 1992 release on vinyl. Probably not an easy one. Probably even getting harder as well to find this one on vinyl. I don't know. I haven't checked, but I've had this for quite some time. When I got back into collecting vinyl, this was one of the first albums I wanted to get. Alright, so it's about 5 albums from 1992 that I've showed that were released in 1992 on vinyl, and in my next video I'll show you some more and give you some information about those. Alright, bye for now.